The night was colder than it had any right to be. The kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it settles in your bones. And there he stood, outside the shelter's gate. A man with a duffel bag that had seen too many roads, and a heart that had carried too much war. His name was Elijah Cole, a veteran, a survivor, and tonight, a man invisible to the world he once fought for. "Ain't got no more beds," the guard grunted. "Try somewhere else." Elijah's breath clouded in the winter air. He looked at the sign above the building, Hope Haven Shelter, and wondered if the name had always been a lie. He'd fought for this country, carried brothers out of fire in the desert, held dying men whose last words were about home. Now he stood before a warm building, and couldn't even get a bed. "Please," Elijah murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just for the night." The guard smirked. "We don't take people like you no more. Rules changed. Management said we gotta keep things tidy." A couple of the younger volunteers snickered behind the glass door. One of them pulled out a phone and whispered, "Yo, check this, man really begging to sleep in the lobby." Their laughter echoed like bullets in Elijah's chest. He didn't fight back, didn't curse, didn't cry. He just lowered his head and walked away, the sound of their laughter following him into the darkness. They saw a broken man, but what they didn't see was the strength still breathing under that old coat. The fire of a soldier who'd been counted out before and still rose. Elijah, clean-shaven, in uniform, smiling at a photo of his unit. Behind him, a small American flag waves in the breeze. He joined the army at 19, full of pride and faith. He believed serving meant belonging. But the world outside the base had its own wars, ones fought in silence, behind polite smiles and invisible walls. When he came home, things were different. Jobs disappeared. The VA lost his paperwork, again and again. His PTSD grew louder. And the same society that praised his service whispered, unstable, behind his back. They say war changes a man. But no one talks about what happens when the war ends, and the world won't take him back. His apartment vanished when he couldn't make rent. His truck got repossessed. Soon, everything he owned fit inside one bag, the same one he carried through the desert. And still, Elijah kept hope. Every night, he'd stop at that same shelter gate, praying the answer would be different. But every time, it wasn't. Sometimes, it wasn't just rejection, it was mockery. The kind that eats at your soul. One night, after being turned away again, he sat by a flickering streetlight and whispered to himself, "I fought for freedom. Just didn't know I'd have to fight for a pillow too." The camera lingers on his face, worn, cracked, but still noble. They laughed at a man who'd lost everything, not knowing fate was waiting to laugh last. Every city has two faces. One the tourists take pictures of, and one the forgotten sleep beneath. Elijah Cole sat under a bridge near Fifth Avenue, his breath visible in the cold. Around him, the world rushed past, businessmen with coffees, joggers with earbuds, kids with laughter. No one looked down. No one saw him. But he saw everything. He saw the woman who gave her child $1 to hand to the poor man, then quickly pulled the child away before he could speak. He saw the officers who'd rather move him along than ask if he was all right. And he saw the sign across the street, the same shelter that shut him out, expanding, painting its walls, smiling for donors. A reporter's voice echoed from a passing radio. Hope Haven Shelter continues its work supporting veterans and those in need. Director Carol Whitmore says the organization is dedicated to uplifting the community. Elijah froze. Carol Whitmore. He knew that name. She was the one who looked him in the eye last month and said, "We can't risk the safety of our residents. You're not stable enough." But what she meant, and what her eyes betrayed, was something else entirely. Something colder. Something older. Sometimes rejection isn't about rules. It's about faces. The kind they think don't fit the picture they want for their charity brochures. The rain was relentless. Elijah sat near a convenience store, half sheltered by the awning. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Every drop that hit his coat felt like an insult from heaven. A security guard approached. "You can't stay here." Elijah nodded slowly, gathering what little he had. "You a vet?" the guard asked, almost as an afterthought. Elijah nodded again. Served 2 tours. The guard shrugged. My brother did too. He's doing all right, got a house, wife, kids. Maybe you didn't try hard enough. Elijah looked up, his eyes hollow but steady. Maybe your brother came back to a world that kept its promises. The guard didn't answer. He just looked away and muttered, "You people always got excuses." Those words cut deeper than shrapnel ever could. Because Elijah had faced enemies with rifles, but never knew how to fight the ones who wore smiles. Weeks later, he got lucky, or so he thought. A local warehouse was hiring for night security. He shaved, borrowed a clean shirt from another homeless vet, walked 6 miles to get there. Inside, he sat across from a young manager in a crisp suit. The man scanned Elijah's resume, yellowed, wrinkled, but honest. "You've got impressive military experience," the manager said. "But we're looking for someone more presentable." "Presentable?" Elijah asked softly. The man cleared his throat. "You know, stable housing, reliable transportation. We can't have someone who..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Elijah stood, adjusted his sleeve, where his old service patch once rested, and said quietly, "Understood? You want the uniform, not the man who wore it." He left before they could offer him pity. That's the part they never tell you. The medals fade, the parades end, and the world moves on, leaving the soldier behind. That evening, he went back to Hope Haven, rain dripping from his hair, hunger twisting in his gut. This time, there were cameras outside. Local donors and city officials were touring the facility. They posed for photos beside a banner that read, "Serving all with love." Elijah stood behind the line of volunteers, waiting quietly. When the director, Carol Whitmore, noticed him, her smile tightened. "You again," she hissed under her breath. "You can't be here. We've got press." "I just need a place tonight," Elijah murmured. "Please." She leaned closer, whispering sharply, "You need to stop showing up. You're scaring people. This shelter isn't for people like you anymore." Her assistant chuckled softly beside her. "Yeah, go find a park bench. You look like you belong there." The words hit harder than the cold. And just as Elijah turned to walk away, a camera flash caught his face, him in the background of their smiling photo. A symbol of their hypocrisy, frozen forever in a frame of false compassion. That night, Elijah sat in a dark alley, shaking, not from cold this time, but from anger, from a pain that demanded justice. He whispered to himself, "I gave everything I had to this country. My youth, my body, my mind. And still, I'm treated like nothing." He clenched his fists, then slowly exhaled. But pain has 2 paths. One destroys you, the other forges you. That was the night something in Elijah changed. The soldier inside him, the one buried under exhaustion and loss, woke up again. He didn't have a plan yet, but he had something stronger. Resolve. And sometimes, that's all a man needs. He didn't know it yet, but the same shelter that mocked him would soon need the man they rejected. Sometimes, life doesn't announce its shifts with a fanfare. Sometimes, it whispers. A quiet door opens when you least expect it, and the world you thought had rejected you gives a second look. Elijah had been wandering for days after yet another rejection from the shelter. His coat thin, his shoes worn, his duffel bag carrying everything he owned. Yet, despite exhaustion, he noticed things others didn't. A flyer pinned crookedly to a lamppost. An old man struggling to carry boxes into a thrift shop. A young girl drawing chalk figures on the sidewalk. Even in despair, the world still had edges of beauty. One rainy afternoon, Elijah ducked into a small cafe to escape the drizzle. He didn't have money, but he needed warmth, and maybe a few moments of human contact. The barista, a woman in her 20s with kind eyes, noticed him shivering. "You okay, sir?" she asked gently. Elijah nodded, murmuring, "Just cold." She handed him a cup of coffee, no charge, no questions. He clutched it like a treasure, savoring the warmth. It was in these small acts that hope rekindled. Not grand gestures, but glimmers, sparks waiting to ignite. As he sat, he noticed a business card someone had left on a table. It read, "Harold Jennings, Small Investments and Opportunities." helping overlooked potential. Something about the word struck him. Elijah had no money. He had nothing, really. But he had ideas, he had grit, he had experience. The next morning, Elijah found the courage to visit the address on the card. A modest office in a quiet part of town. Harold Jennings, a retired businessman with graying hair and an air of calm authority, greeted him. "You're Elijah Cole?" Harold asked. "I don't normally meet people in your position." Elijah nodded. "I know I don't have much to offer, but I want to invest in something meaningful, something that changes lives, like a shelter." Harold studied him. "You, investing?" Elijah's voice didn't shake. "I know what it means to be overlooked. I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong. I can't fix everything, but I can start." Harold leaned back, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You've got heart. That counts for more than money sometimes. I'll help you." It wasn't a windfall. It wasn't a miracle. It was guidance, mentorship, a doorway, a chance. Hope often arrives not in gold or glory, but in a hand extended when all doors have closed. Over the next months, Elijah worked tirelessly. Day jobs, odd jobs, small investments, each one building a foundation. Every paycheck, every dollar saved, was a brick in a bridge he was building, a bridge back into the world. He found an abandoned property near the city center. Once a small community center, now empty and neglected. He poured every ounce of energy he had into fixing it. The man who once begged for a bed now begged for opportunity, and in the asking, he reclaimed dignity. Word of his efforts spread quietly. Neighbors started helping. A local carpenter donated materials. A retired nurse volunteered time. For the first time in months, Elijah felt seen. Not mocked, not dismissed. Seen. But fate has a way of reminding you where you came from. One evening, as Elijah walked past Hope Haven Shelter, he saw Carol Whitmore, the director who had once mocked him, reviewing expansion plans with a donor. The irony wasn't lost on him. He paused. He could feel the old anger rise, the humiliation he had endured. But he didn't react. He didn't yell. He didn't plead. He simply walked on. Patience is a weapon in the hands of the underestimated, and Elijah had learned its weight. By the next year, Elijah had stabilized financially. He wasn't rich, but he was independent. He had an idea, a shelter of his own, one where veterans like him would never be turned away, where people who had been dismissed and mocked would be given dignity, respect, and beds. The irony, almost poetic, was that Hope Haven was beginning to falter. Management disputes, donor complaints, mismanagement. The building he had once been rejected from, now vulnerable, in need of rescue. Elijah didn't know yet how he would act, but he knew this: the universe has a long memory, and sometimes it balances the scales in ways you can't predict. The world has a way of testing patience. It mocks the fallen, laughs at the overlooked, and yet, in silence, it records everything. Every insult, every snicker, every glance of dismissal, every act of patience builds unseen strength. And when the time comes, the scales tip, often in ways the world never expects. Elijah stood across the street from Hope Haven Shelter. The once imposing building now showed cracks, paint peeling, windows fogged with neglect. Carol Whitmore was inside, arguing with city inspectors over fire safety violations. Donors were complaining, volunteers were quitting. It was chaos, the very shelter that had laughed at him, now struggling to survive. Elijah's car rolled to a stop outside the building. It was modest, but it bore the insignia of hard-earned success, Cole Investments community initiatives. He stepped out, coat clean, eyes steady, posture commanding. Inside, the staff barely recognized him when he walked in. "Can I help you?" one volunteer asked nervously. "Yes," Elijah said quietly. "I'm here to make an offer." Carol Whitmore looked up from her papers, startled. "Elijah, this isn't." He cut her off with a calm, deliberate tone. "I've been watching Hope Haven struggle. I want to buy it." Silence. Her eyes widened. "Buy it? That's impossible. I never needed permission, Elijah interrupted. I just needed a chance. The room buzzed with tension. Volunteers whispered. Donors looked shocked. Carol's voice shook. You're the homeless man we turned away. Elijah met her gaze. Yes, the one you mocked, the one you humiliated, and now, the one who decides the future of this building. It wasn't gloating, it wasn't revenge, it was justice, the kind that leaves the moral weight on those who thought themselves superior. The world had called him nothing, and now, it had no choice but to call him the owner. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, while the world realizes it's been standing in the wrong line all along. Carol tried to protest. You don't understand. This shelter, it has regulations, donors. Elijah held up a hand. I understand perfectly. You refused me a bed when I needed it. You mocked me, dismissed me, made me feel less than human. I remember every word. And now, I get to decide who gets the help this shelter provides. Will it be exclusion or inclusion? She looked down. Her carefully constructed authority had crumbled. Volunteers shifted uncomfortably. Donors were silent. For the first time, everyone saw Elijah Cole clearly. Elijah didn't fire anyone. He didn't humiliate anyone publicly. Instead, he implemented a plan. Beds for all veterans, no questions asked. Programs for PTSD recovery, job training, and mental health support. Scholarships and mentorships for those society had discarded. He had turned rejection into opportunity, mockery into morality. The shelter became a model for inclusion. Carol, now a volunteer under his guidance, silently assisted. Some people never learn humility without experiencing it firsthand. Others, when given a chance, can redeem themselves. Elijah didn't just buy a building. He bought justice, with patience as his currency. Outside, a small group of homeless veterans watched Elijah's work unfold from the street. Some remembered him shivering, rejected, mocked. Some whispered among themselves. That's him. That's the man we thought was nothing. Elijah caught their gaze. He smiled softly, a quiet reassurance. It's not about revenge, he said to no one in particular. It's about making sure no one else has to stand where I stood. The strongest victories are not the loudest, not the ones that humiliate, but the ones that restore dignity, bring hope, and remind the world that no one is invisible forever. Some stories end with applause, some with headlines, but the stories that last are the ones that change lives quietly, without notice. Elijah walked through the halls of Hope Haven, now his shelter, now a sanctuary. Veterans he had once passed on the street were eating, talking, laughing. Children of working parents who had no place to stay after school were drawing, learning, thriving. He stopped for a moment and looked at the wall near the entrance. There was a framed photograph of him from a year ago, sitting under a streetlight, coat tattered, eyes tired. He traced the glass lightly with his finger. That man, the one they mocked, the one they dismissed, he never stopped believing in something better. He turned pain into purpose, humiliation into hope, and the world had no choice but to acknowledge it. Elijah stood outside, looking up at the city skyline. The air was crisp, the sunset burning gold across the buildings. He thought of Carol Whitmore, once his mocker, now one of his volunteers. People will often underestimate you. They will doubt your strength, dismiss your dreams, even mock your struggles. But the measure of a man is not what they think of him. It's what he does when no one is watching, and when he finally has the chance to act. A young veteran approached him, eyes wide. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. I've been on the street for months. I didn't think anyone cared. Elijah smiled softly. You don't need to thank me. Just keep moving forward. Help the next person when you can. The veteran nodded. The real victory isn't revenge. It's the chain of hope that grows stronger with every hand you lift, every life you touch, every injustice you turn into opportunity. Elijah turned back to the shelter. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Inside, it was extraordinary, a testament to patience, resilience, and quiet justice. The world will always test you. It will judge you by your coat, your shoes, your circumstances. It will laugh at the broken, dismiss the overlooked, and pretend not to see the suffering. But every act of mockery, every word of dismissal, is a debt the universe remembers. And sometimes, that debt is repaid not with anger, but with quiet power, unwavering patience, and the courage to build something better than revenge. Elijah Cole wasn't just a veteran, a homeless man, or a survivor. He was a reminder that dignity cannot be taken away, that perseverance has its own justice, and that those who underestimate the heart of a man may one day find themselves standing inside a world he rebuilt, while they watch from the shadows. Know this: justice is quiet, dignity is enduring, hope is unbreakable. If you believe in truth, justice, and the power of storytelling to inspire change, you're in the right place. Subscribe and be part of our community to explore more exclusive and insightful contents on these pertinent topics.